Now, there were similar incidents in Borno State concerning insecurity over the weekend involving suicide attacks, this time by insurgents. To discuss the effects of these attacks on the communities, the UNICEF Deputy Representative in Nigeria, Pernilla Ironside, joins us live from Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Your organization shows great concern over the increase in the use of children as suicide bombers by insurgents. Do you have an estimate of the number of minors that have been used in such attacks since the insurgency began?
Yes, indeed. In fact, children have been bearing the greatest brunt of this conflict in the Northeast for quite some time. And since 2014, over 240 children have been used as human bombs in various incidents in the Northeast. And that does not include the horrific events from Sunday, the latest incident when 3 children were used in an incident that killed over 30 people and left 40 people injured. We, as UNICEF, express our deepest condolences for those families and people affected by this tragic incident.
Yes, and we echo that sentiment, our thoughts and our prayers with the families affected by this conflict. But very alarming is this use of children. How can children be protected in conflict zones?
Well, children are extremely vulnerable during a situation of armed conflict. And of course, the obvious answer is to halt the conflict and ensure there's peace and stability. But notwithstanding that, and all of the efforts that are being undertaken towards having a stable and secure situation, children need to be the highest priority in terms of being kept safe. That means ensuring that there aren't any further attacks on civilian infrastructure like schools, like hospitals, in accordance with international humanitarian law. It means that children also during displacement movements need to be protected from being separated from their families. They also need to not be used in any kind of capacity related to the military in order for them to be able to maintain some semblance of their childhood and normalcy under these very difficult conditions.
What is your greatest concern? It's abuse, to say the least, that a child could be used as a weapon in a situation such as this by Boko Haram. But what is your greatest concern, and what are the effects in the long term of this use of children or abuse of children to the society?
The impact is incredibly dangerous, I would say, because we're talking about a generation now of children who have been affected over the past 10 years by conflict and insecurity, and many of whom who've known nothing but that. In terms of the prospects of, firstly, their survival, we are seeing incredibly high numbers of children who do not even survive the first week, let alone 30 days after their birth. The average is more than double in Borno State of the number of children who die within the first 30 days than the national average. And the national average is about 800 children per day who die before their first month. So firstly, that issue of survival is critical, but then we also need to consider the longer term effects in terms of their access to education, being able to develop themselves, having the support and stability that's necessary for any child to be able to really develop to their full potential. They're living under extremely stressful conditions. They are many times traumatized and have, as a result of that, they're in need of psychosocial support and in some cases even mental health support. They've been losing family members, caregivers. These are extreme conditions for any child's upbringing. So the prospects for these children in terms of their future, as well as the future of the state and the country in this region, are critical. And more investment and intention needs to be paid towards these children as a priority in order to really ensure that they have that possibility of some sense of prospect, some sense of stability and security.
Yeah, one will have to have a heart of stone not to empathize with the children. I was watching the conflict in Syria and how children are being affected by that conflict, not too far removed from what's happening in Borno State as far as that trauma is concerned. But organizations such as UNICEF are helping the federal government to meet the needs of displaced people this time, including children. And there's increasing frustration that the number of refugees in the Northeast is growing beyond the capacity of the international donors to help. What could be done to shore this up?
Well, indeed, there's over 1.8 million internally displaced people in the northeast of Nigeria, and this is in Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states. 80% of those people are displaced in Borno State. Most are living in host communities, with a smaller proportion, about 40%, in camps for internally displaced people. It's those people in the camps who are more easily accessible, but the conditions are extremely dire. They're oftentimes living in locations that are ring-fenced by the military from a security perspective, but that is also limiting the possibility for more tents to be allocated. There's literally thousands of people who have been living for months now out in the open skies with no shelter to speak of, and with insufficient latrines to be able to cater to their needs in an appropriate way. So the conditions are extremely dire. Now, that's not to say that massive efforts for humanitarian assistance are not underway. It's just that with increased numbers of displaced people coming, and it's been another 80,000 of late, particularly since November, it's imperative that certain conditions be made available that facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance and, of course, the protection of these people.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on this issue. UNICEF Deputy Representative Pernilla Ironside, thank you for your time.